So I'm always very observant of time. So I want to make certain that we get up and get running here, and we'll keep adding people in. This will be recorded so that afterwards you guys will be able to have access to the link to watch parts of it over again. So for myself, this is one of my favorite topics, very near and dear to my heart, because for those of you who don't know, there's been a lot of stress issues in my family, a lot for myself that is part of my system or constitution that's always been weaker. If I had to strengthen it a bit to be able, and continuously to be able to participate in life. So to get to talk about the nervous system and how to keep it strengthened so that we can best interact with the world in a productive way and a way that doesn't take us down, absolutely thrills me to no end. So thank you everyone who is joining today. So we're going to start out with, I want to ask a question, and that is, how does your tree look? So for those of you who've been following along with this, you know that we've been talking about and looking at our health like a tree, so that if we have a good root system and good nutrition and everything being balanced and supported, we have a nice strong trunk, beautiful branches. I'm going to tell you that picture of that tree that is there on the left, that's what my tree looked like for a long time. As you notice, it's still standing there. It's still got some green leaves, but that doesn't mean that it's being able to provide shade, or that it's strong enough to be able to deal with the Kansas wind, or that we're not going to end up with ivy and vines or Virginia creeper growing up on it and taking advantage of it. So what I did was I listed some things that very much represented what my everyday life looked like when I crashed so bad all those years ago. And I'm wondering how many of you can relate to any of these. Literally, at points, I just felt frozen. I could not deal with one more thing. That's just how that was going to be. Memory challenges. I can't even tell you how many times I would go to the grocery store and I'd be walking down the aisle and I had no clue what I was supposed to be getting. I didn't know why I was there or what I was looking for. I went to periods where I was beyond exhausted, and I'd bounce back and forth from just absolute crashing and exhausted sleep to insomnia. So therefore I was not getting a balance. I didn't even have energy to consider doing anything for myself. Putting myself on the list was not something I could even comprehend or think of to do. Stuffing my feelings. So many people are aware of and do that. And for me, I'd take my thoughts and I would swallow them down. And guess what? I'm sure it comes as no surprise, but we can't digest our feelings. Therefore, it went on and caused different health issues for me. Hit a point where I was getting angry at insignificant things. It wasn't whatever the issues were, but that's what was happening. I was reacting. Also going back and forth between craving salty and sweet things. Hormones, what are those? I mean, talk about ending up with, changing your cycle all the way around, libido going out the window. I mean, my body didn't have energy for that. Depression, that was not something that was normal for me, yet I was dealing with some of that. And another thing was hypersensitivity to noise and light. It didn't take anything for me to jump at, one of the kids walking around the corner and I didn't know they were there, or stepping out into the light. And all of these were things that I was dealing with. And so I'm wondering how many of you have a tree that looks like mine looked. And so this felt very important to share some of what I had gone through. And that's where, let me think, like 28, 30 years ago, that's how bad it was. That's what took me a year just to even get on my feet, much less being able to continue going on and end up raising 6 children. So as we move forward, I want to look at here and there we go. Talk a little bit about adaptogens. And a lot of people have heard me talk about referencing and comparing adaptogens, what they do for your body, being similar to a shock absorber. So I thought this would be fun, put a picture up here. And as you can see, and by the way, I know nothing about mechanics, but it was very obvious to me with what I could see going on in this picture that that spring is designed to help the body to, or the car to deal with the bounce of what's going on. So otherwise, if we don't have the shock absorber and we hit a pothole, we're all going to feel it. If we do have the shock absorber, we hit the potholder, we feel it, but it's a lighter response, and we don't slam into the ceiling, we don't jar our back, we recover faster. That to me is exactly how an adaptogen works for me and my body, and what I've seen for so many people. And the fact that by definition that they are non-toxic, that is just exciting to me, because knowing that I'd had this area that so much needed to be strengthened, being able to utilize adaptogens in the last 8 years has kept me from having to go back and take, like now, like I was saying earlier this morning on my live, a year and a half, or maybe not recovering from everything that I threw at with saving Troy's life. Troy may be not recovering because he didn't have these adaptogens to help him deal with what was going on. And so to me, that shock absorber is a great picture and understanding to help people see and understand what is going on there. So I thought it would be great before we move forward to ask Greg to share a little bit about the rest of the story for those of you who that will obviously date myself with Paul Harvey. I thought it would be very helpful to understand where and how this amazing product came about that is loaded with adaptogens, and then we'll get a little bit more into that. So Greg, it's all yours.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you for the invite. And I'm gonna resist this powerful urge I always feel to go to slides and look at plants. I mean, I love doing that. Just like I love learning from those slides. I love the shock absorber. And Algin, I love your picture of the tree, because I think all of us at some point have those bare limbs and things that you don't see beneath the bark that just aren't flowing right. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we gather together. It's soul. But I do want to tell you about adaptable and adaptogens, because it kind of, I guess I would have to say, it's not kind of silently into my life and changed it forever, changed our whole family's lives. And the reason I kind of use the word silent, I think there are a lot of things out there to do with health that people use that create a sensation. You know, some of them are chemicals and some are natural, and they're trying to balance out a negative. I always look at adaptogens, just like Valerie said. They're just packed full of nutrition and a lot of different active compounds, but they're not the herbs you go to feel a sensation like heat, or all of a sudden the mucus flowing when it's dried up, or drying up the mucus when it's flowing too much, or, you know, all the different things that we'll kind of use in health that you can kind of feel a change with. And yet adaptogens start making changes immediately. But to me, they always work silently, because they work down in the root area of the trees that Valerie teaches us. If our health is like that, that is what I learned unknowingly myself. And it's not until today's topic, Valerie asked me to tell you about Donna, that I could see it a little more visually, because I got to see it in someone else, my wife. Maybe some of you know that I was 20 years with another company before we founded Soul. And the last 6 years of my time there, I was the president of the United States and the Caribbean, which was about half of the company. And one of the things that we did is we enjoyed an event once a year with new leaders whose health businesses had grown in the past year, and they'd earned a trip back to the office, and we'd have some training sessions, but we'd always have a dinner. And I always tried to make it a point to, I don't know, to jump around and eat with as many as I could of these new leaders. Well, one night I ended up eating with a lady who was, I want to say, probably between 30 and 40, somewhere around there in age, about the age of my wife. Her name was Patricia. She was from Northern California. And I always used to joke with them and say, what you, when I met with people for the first time, I'd say, what brought you into these crazy herbs? Because I didn't know a thing about herbs, and I thought they were crazy until somebody was kind enough to show them to me, knowing that I had some needs. So I saw they worked in my life, and the rest is history. But I asked her that question. She said, well, what brought me into it was depression. In such a serious depression that she had, I think her husband temporarily, because she couldn't cope, had moved back in with her mother, excuse me, and had locked herself in her room and had been there for, I can't remember how many weeks. She didn't leave her room. She had other health issues at the same time, but the depression was the overwhelming last straw, I guess, you know. And her mother, like so many wonderful mothers, had been out there looking for something to help her daughter, and had gone to a meeting and had learned about these herbal combinations that could help. And she had bought her a package and brought it home. And I think she had this, Patricia had a fireplace in her bedroom. And she said that they just sat on top of the mantle. She didn't get them down because she thought herbs were nuts. And she finally, after weeks, told herself, well, they're not going to make me any worse than I am now. So I'm just going to take them. So I asked her, what changed? Because the rest was history. And did you just feel happier? She says, no, it didn't happen that way. Little things that I just gotten used to went away and got better. Little negatives, like pains, like acid, just never digesting, never feeling she could eat and digest her food. I'm thinking of the things Valerie just described in her tree. And that was her. And she said, I just felt, you know, within, I can't remember, honestly, a couple of weeks. It was weeks, and it wasn't a month. It was very short order. She felt good enough to leave her room and go out into the house, and then go out into the yard. By the time I met her, she just glowed. I would never have guessed she had been through this. And she had no way of knowing that night, when she told me her story, my wife, Donna, had been almost a year and a half on Zoloft and was scared to death because the doctor had already increased her to the maximum dose, and it was time to switch to a new drug. And she didn't want to do that because she was afraid it wouldn't work, because the odds aren't really great on a lot of those that they work for you anyway. She was kind of a lucky one that Zoloft had helped her. And she had kept taking a few herbs, but they weren't anywhere close to enough, and she was afraid. And that was the night that I had the dinner. It's still an emotional experience, because I'm not one that believes in coincidence. And I feel like, Valerie, you felt like you should show your tree tonight. There's a reason. It might be someone one of us is going to reach out to. I don't know. There's a reason, and it's important. And that's that's what I learned from this with my wife. She ended up, I shared Patricia's whole story. She said, I'm gonna add her herbs to what I'm doing. And she started taking it. I've shared before. It was like 30 some odd capsules twice a day. She didn't always take the 60, but she took between 30 and 60. And what she noticed is she was able to back down the Zoloft. And if she felt any different, say, not as grounded, it's hard to describe it because her words are better, then she'd hold steady. She wouldn't back down anymore. When she felt confident, she'd back down some more. And she did it over like 3 or 4 months. And after like 6 months, she was just taking the herbs, lots of them. And then she was taking some minimal cut dose of Zoloft regularly. And we finally had gone to a marathon and then had to get on a cruise ship afterwards for work. And we got on the ship, we just boarded, and she said, I forgot my Zoloft. She said, well, I guess we're gonna find out if the herbs are enough. And that week passed, and she said, I didn't even miss them. And that was her experience. That experience, it started me watching and listening and looking more into why. When she had tried everything with herbs, we had a cabinet full of 200 different herbal combinations, and she was not one who didn't take enough. She took small quantities, large quantities, combined lots of expert herbalists like Valerie. And you don't have to be an expert to share, but we knew so many that were really experienced. Didn't matter. We weren't able to solve it until these particular herbs got into her life. That got me looking about adaptogens. And when other events happened in life, and some of you who've known me for a few years know, other things happened. And at the time they seemed like trials. They were blessings because they led me to look, and others who I was close to look more into these adaptogens. When we got to the point we decided that there was nothing on the market based upon this approach, a more balanced approach, because adaptogens, not only are they non-toxic, but it doesn't matter what the imbalance is, if it's an accelerator too much or if it's too little, both sides. They have components on either side. That's why they're called adaptogens. That's one of the characteristics. You can be a good herb that's safe, that's non-toxic, but you're not an adaptogen unless you have those characteristics on either side of imbalance. So an example would be like prickly pear cactus. Nopal has components that result in the lowering of sugar in the blood and other components that result in the raising of sugar levels in the blood. Dr. Mary Fernandez in San Diego, an MD, did those studies and showed that same plant. So these are adaptogens. And we got looking into that, decided to found the company. And my wife said, okay, if you're going to do this, she was excited. She said, I'm taking 60 years a day to level my mood. So my first request is a product that I can use for this aspect of my health. Of course, it touches on all aspects when you deal with this, but we didn't know that at the time. We just knew what we knew, what we were going through. And so we did lots of research, worked with a chemist that we'd known for 15 years. We noticed that there were changes and improvements in the way herbs were extracted and the concentrations of adaptogenic herbs. And we combined various key adaptogens together until we got to the point where Donna told me, and she tried different versions of this, by the way, not just the final version. When she said, 2 capsules of this, I feel even better than with my 60. That's when we stopped. And that's when we put the label on adaptable. So the adaptable is Donna's formula. And there are lots of Donnas in the world. In fact, we all go through some of what she went through. I know some of us go through it at different times, different ways, and different degrees. But we all go through some of it. And adaptable to me is something that now Donna will say, what she feels is she knows in 45 minutes after she takes whatever she takes, 2-3 capsules, she listens to her body and takes the amount she needs. She knows how she's going to feel. That's how she'll tell you now, I know what's going to change in me. So I just want to say that it's kind of the root of what we do at Soul. And like Valerie, it might be my favorite topic too, because we all need it. Back to you, Val.
All right. Thank you, Greg. That was spot on in the direction that I was hoping that you would take that. So what we're going to look at now is a little bit of the key, what's listed as the 4 key benefits for adaptable, helping getting nice sustained energy to overcome stress. There's a smidgen of St. John's wort in this, helps the body to deal with depression. And this, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Vital, there's a small amount of adaptable in it minus the St. John's wort, whereas this way in the adaptable, many of us need extra of those adaptogens. And when you're getting that balancing effect, it does help give, again, a sustained energy. And then helping to support and enhance the immune system, which is going to help elevate and balance mood. If we think about it, when we have a really crisis situation, it does hamper our immunity. And then on a side note, the body cannot tell the difference between good stress and bad stress. Could be all excited because a family member is getting married and it's a dream wedding. That can be just as stressful and hard on the body as a major loss in the family. I will tell you that I think it was maybe a month after Troy started taking this 8 years ago. And for those of you that don't know, he has a traumatic brain injury. And he actually was stopped on the street here in town by a longtime customer that said, "What are you doing different? You look happy." And so that's when we realized how visual it was for people outside of ourselves. I want to look at, there's 6 adaptogens in this amazing product. So for those of you that don't know, eleuthero, we grew up knowing Siberian ginseng. We, if it's not right there, their specific one out of Siberia, it's got to be called eleuthero, but I'm telling you, it's the same thing. So a lot of people are aware of that when it comes to athletics, endurance, stress response, Shazandra. And again, this is just the highlights. I've got a book that's, almost 1,000 pages thick that's just on adaptogens that I reference out of. So this one here is superior, as in one of the top-notch adaptogens, works anti-inflammatory. Nice misspelling there. But anyhow, it's potent is what that's supposed to say, antioxidants. Astragalus. There's all kinds of studies with astragalus and how it does support virtually all body systems. And the studies looked at that. Ashwagandha, used in Ayurvedic medicine for over 2,500 years. We have so much history in these plants and their effective use and results with them. Jagulin. I love this adaptogen in here because it helps to bring support healthy blood pressure ranges. And for the amount of pain that Troy was under as a result of this, health challenge that he had was so extreme that it shot his blood pressure up to 180 over 130. I gave him large amounts of the adaptogens, and they did have to put him on a blood pressure med. You had to, because the pain response was making things worse. So we bumped this up. We also bumped up the vital. In fact, he got a reading today, and he is down to 120 over 80. It is phenomenal. And so now the doctor is ready to support us taking him back off that med, because they knew it was temporary to deal with the pain. I tell you, my belief is this, and the vital was a huge role in that. And rhodiola. A lot of people are aware with that and how it helps with outlook in life. And we all know when we don't feel good or we're overwhelmed and stressed, it kind of tends to affect our outlook a little bit. So now I wanted to take a moment, and we've got 2 people that are going to share a little bit about their story. And we're going to start with Laura. Laura, can you unmute yourself? Oh, I muted you. Where'd you go? I was trying to help. I won't touch it. You unmute it.
There we go.
There you go. Go for it, lady.
Okay, so I guess let me start off by saying I have suffered from anxiety and depression most of my adult life. And it became really apparent after my 3rd child, Sydney, and then I went on to have a 4th. But I have been on, I'm still taking an antidepressant along with my soul stuff. But about 7 years ago, I was in a position where I was so tired to the point I couldn't even speak. And the minute I came out of bed, I wanted to go back to bed. But I couldn't do that because I had kids that I needed to take care of, and I had a husband. And at the time, I was women's ministry leader for our church. But it got so bad that just all of those things that Valerie showed on the chart, plus I was dropping things, like my muscles weren't even, I was dropping things. But I went to my regular GP, and he, of course, did the ton of blood work, and everything came back fine. And I told him, I said, look, I am 45 and I feel like I'm 85. There is something wrong. And he was like, no, Laura, you're fine. You're just tired. You're a mom and it's all going to be okay. And I was like, no, there is something wrong with me. And so I did find another doctor in town who gave me the cortisol testing. And so that did show that there was something wrong with my adrenals. And so he started me on a little bit of a protocol, like the stuff that he had. And it got a little better, but it didn't get a lot better. And I still did not feel like myself. And so my best friend Tammy invited me to her house to meet Valerie. And at the time I was skeptical. I was a little skeptical. And so I started on a few things, and I felt a little bit different. And then I went in to see Valerie. My husband and I both went in to see her in her office, and she started me on a protocol. And so I feel pretty darn good. And the other thing I would like to add is something you had said earlier in the day, Valerie, was that, you know, you felt like had you not, you know, been healthy and on your soul, you could have not have dealt with Troy's stuff. So it's probably been 2 years, I started seeing a therapist because I felt like I wasn't really having a handle on my depression and anxiety, and I was acting out in ways that I didn't understand. And so I started with a therapist, and just through all the work that we did, I do have PTSD from my upbringing, but I feel like that the days I went in there, you know, they're hard, and it's hard to address your stuff. But I feel like had I not had the soul, it would have been so much harder. And I would even go in there with a big renew before I sat down, and I would drink that the entire time her and I would talk. And I just feel like I was never ready until 2 years ago at that moment to address those things. And I know it has so much to do with soul.
Oh, that's wonderful, Laura. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of you. And you're right. It did help with that foundation. I think you nailed it to where you feel like you could step in and take the next steps.
Right. And I had talked to her too, because I wish I did not have to deal with depression, but for me, it has such a huge genetic component. And I asked my counselor one day, I said, okay, I want to win this battle. And she said, well, I guess that depends on what you think a win is. And I said, well, a win would be for me not to have this at all. And she said, well, that won't happen until you get to heaven. But she said, I think your win is that you're learning how to manage it. And if you can continue to manage it and continue to be healthy, you have to look at that as your win. And so that was kind of a little life-changing statement for me. So it is a win. I mean, it feels like it's a win.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And our next person I was going to share was Shauna. If you can unmute yourself, Shauna, we'll love to hear you.
Are you sure you want me to unmute?
Go for it. We're ready. We can hear you.
Have so much, as Valerie and Greg know, but Laura, oh my gosh, I could just hug you because I know exactly what some of that you're going through. And I have to tell you, it was 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago, which I have to stop and think about that, was when I actually went off of my Cymbalta. And I've been chemically altered for more than 25 years. So I get it. But bringing soul into building that foundation, my central nervous system is of course, your spine. And mine's been compromised for a very, very long time. So I also have learned in the last couple of years genetically that I don't balance my stress well. Well, that's great. I'm glad to know that. But you know what? For 8 years, I've been doing it. And it's all because of the adaptogens. And without those, I promise you, I wouldn't still probably be here and upright like I am, managing the surgeries and stress over the last 5 years. If some of you don't know, I had like a lymph node removed. It was benign. It was scary, but we were like, you know what, this is going to be fine. And we felt a sense of peace, even though we were going through those trials. And 5 weeks later, a cervical fusion repair. And I managed that mostly with Sol and a little bit of Advil. Fast forward 3 years, you know, the unspeakable, I ended up having to have the lumbar surgery. And, you know, feeding this foundation this whole time, I was able to move through those stressors. But that surgery was 11 weeks ago when we went into the quarantine, stay at home. And I just had a peace about doing it. I thought, you know what, I'm going to be okay. And we went in, and of course I'd taken everything and I obeyed the rules. I didn't take it like 5 to 7 days before surgery. Okay, it was 7. I hated it. But I got there you know, and Mike couldn't go back with me. I was alone back there, you know, pre-surgery for 3.5 hours. People around me begging for narcotics and were in so much pain. And they kept coming in saying, do you need anything? And I said, I'm good, I'm fine. And I had such a sense of peace. I prayed, I told my husband I'd be fine. And it was kind of amazing and a little surreal. But that's what soul and adaptogens have been able to do for me. It doesn't mean every day is perfect. But it wasn't until 2 years ago that I could go off an antidepressant, and I don't need it because I'm covered, and I probably could have done it sooner, but the doctor wouldn't listen and didn't completely understand the power of what soul brings to the table until they've watched me. When they watch me, then they're going, oh wow. And I'm like, yes, please read this. And I will tell them that over and over until they listen. But that experience going into this surgery and managing everything that I am now, because the nerve pain is still pretty bad when I step wrong, and it's going to take up to a year to heal. I have tools. Those adaptables, man, they're magic pills. And I will tell you, on my worst day, I took 16. Greg, please don't tell anybody. But it worked for me. It doesn't mean I do it every day, but
That might be a record.
now I might do 2 to 4. I mean, and if I can't sleep at night, I'll pop 2, and I drift right back to sleep. That stuff is golden. I will never be without it. So anyway, yeah, stress, anxiety, it's been off the charts, but I've managed it, and I hide it because people don't know.
My group of people are just so different than the rest of these people. But I got to give them credit. They're showing up for the Zoom calls at noon. But the Lord, they tell me what to do, and I'm going to go do it. I don't want to do no work.
Is this?
Do a muto, Valerie. You can do a muto.
So
There we go. All right. So thank you, Shauna. That was perfect. And this comes right in here. And I wanted to show again as well, always reference back this dis-ease tree. And you can see how the adaptable is coming in at these crucial and critical points down where the constitution, we're talking about mental, emotional stress, nutritional deficiencies create a stress on the body. We know physical trauma does. We know toxic overload does. Your terrain, as in, you know, how your pH is running, and in your body systems, how strong or weak are they? All that, the adaptable comes straight in. And we talk about, foundation. You know, I like to have people have a base foundation. The Bella Health package is a perfect way to start. Is it where you have to start? No. If you just want to start with adaptable, I mean, reach out to your mentor or the person who invited you to this. But some people want to know, how do I really get to those roots and get in and change things? So I thought this was a great little quote that ties back directly to what we're doing here with looking at the roots and the trees and stress. It's not the load that breaks you down. It's the way you carry it. And to me, the adaptogens help me to carry it. Is it going to make me not have to deal with crises in my life ever again? No, it's not that kind of pill. Does it help me be able to survive them, get through it, and feel like I said this morning, still standing tall? Yeah, at the end of all this with Troy, my body said, you know what? He's okay. He's going to survive. Now, you know what? Take a week or 2, sit down, rest, reboot. That's not the same as a year or a year and a half or a couple years, guys. When you can, you know, this is huge for me to have, and that's why I want to show you how bad it had been for me in the past. That was before I even used adaptogens. Adaptogens made all the difference for me.